Yeah.
But anyway, we're rolling, Matt.
Oh, all right.
Thanks for being here.
Cool. Thank you.
Checkmark Automations.
Yeah.
Tell me and everyone what it is and what you do.
Yeah. So Checkmark automations, we do like workflow process automation, which is basically you can think of it as like taking all of the sort of annoying things about running a business, like updating stuff and keeping different pieces of software straight, like to keep your sales organized or your marketing or all this stuff. There's a lot of things that we all do on a day-to-day basis, and the idea is that a lot of these things actually can be automated and are not necessarily things that are great use of your time as a business owner or a employee or somebody who is really limited by like these processes that we do, right? So if we can take and make those different business apps, your QuickBooks, your CRM, all of these different things talk to each other, we can then make it so a lot of that updating and organizational tasks are off your plate, and you can have more time to do the things that actually like add a lot of value to your business, like you know making sure your customers are super happy and like really having that personal touch, or in sales, like making sure that you're showing up for your clients in the way that they feel really cared for, because you're not spending all this time on the admin, on updating your CRM, on making sure that marketing knows what you're doing or making sure that operations knows what you're doing. Like, our systems are designed so that everyone can know what you're doing all at one time, and it can be organized without you having to put a ton of energy into that. So then you can focus your energy in other places. So yeah, that's Checkmark Automations in a nutshell.
Hi, folks. Quick note from me. If you don't already know, the goal of Mountain Mule is to build real connection between Montana's businesses and the people they serve. We provide private transportation services and Yellowstone National Park tours. If this episode or any other has given you something worth thinking about, smiling at, passing along, I've got a small ask. Share it with a friend, text it to someone, consider following the show. Whether you're using our services directly or following and sharing the show, those simple actions help support this business as well as the businesses and guests that have been a part of the show. Thank you for supporting these Montana businesses, local jobs, and this beautiful state. Now back to the show. These are my words, not yours. So you're basically making your business operate the opposite of the government, essentially.
Yes, yeah,
Hyper
exactly.
efficient.
Yeah, hyper efficient. Yeah.
Streamlined. How long have you been doing it?
So we've been doing it for about 2 years now. And at the very beginning it was kind of consulting, right? And just me, and now there's four of us. So we've grown a fair bit and worked with like a lot of businesses and kind of evolved the tools that we use. At first we started using primarily this tool called Zapier, which is effectively just a connector, right? A middleware connector. And we've slowly expanded into other areas of like technology tools and other business apps, so that we can really like serve our customers in a holistic way, right? So that we're not pigeonholed into just like, okay, we just connect QuickBooks and Salesforce. It's like, no, let's think about this as a system, right? And think about how we can make it better as a system. So, I mean, like the first thing I do with most clients, right, and we've done this before, is like we sit down and we look at your processes, like how your clients come in, how they find you, how you sell to them, how you service them, and then how you take care of them after the sale, and how you're taking care of like your customer service. And we literally like map it all out in a workflow diagram, which is like just basically a flow chart. Um, and then we can find like the places where there might be some issues, right? Or that you might be spending more time than you have to be doing it. And then we kind of fit the tools that we're going to use to automate or operationalize those things to whatever specifically you're doing. So it's not like we start with the tool, we start with the process, then we bring the tool in. And it's oftentimes a variety of tools actually.
So it was sometime in 24 is when you started doing this?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know I'm not like overly involved in AI space, although I use it, I use it daily for my business too. I feel a lot of times that I use it so much. And then I think in my head, I'm probably barely past the tip of the iceberg of what I could be doing. How has at least the current landscape with AI, has that made things easier for you to do, harder to do? Is it just more of an advantage? And then I use the term AI loosely because some people you talk to will say AI's existed forever and this is just the most advanced version that we now have. So, I mean, how do you use it? And I guess how do you think about what AI is in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, AI is, well, first off, like AI is not a monolith, right? Like you mentioned, it's kind of been around in theoretical and then practical formats for a fair bit, right? I mean, we have like IBM Watson from way, way back, and machine learning is really just statistical modeling, right? Ultimately. So an AI is thinking about what it is predicting that you should say, right? And that's sort of the way that it does natural language. And these chatbots are a result of that, right? But since 2024, I mean, the amount of change that has happened, even in that small amount of time, right, a couple of years, is astronomical. I mean, it's unbelievable, really. And even, you know, it's a really exciting time because even from a year ago or 6 months ago, like these models are getting so much better and so much more effective that we can actually start to use them, right? So, everyone's always, or, I think most people that have used AI have had some variety of experience with it where it's given you a really like out there result, like something that's totally out of the box, right? Um, or it's just made something up or hallucinated, right? So a lot of those things exist, and they still exist, but as these models get better, they're learning so much with every single one of them that we're seeing those things kind of become reduced, right? And it's awesome as a business owner, small business owner, to utilize those tools in sort of the way that we would use like traditional development or the traditional workflow to help, automate and provide some assistance, right, on these things that were traditionally kind of, I don't want to say boring, but some of these traditionally like more busy work tasks, like creating reports or pulling numbers for your business, or you know responding to like some certain inquiries, right? As we all know as business owners, like 80% of your client inquiries are going to be stuff that is already on your website, right? So the best experience for that customer is going to be getting that answer quickly, right? Um, there's another 20% that really need your help, right? You personally, as like an individual. So, one of the things that we can do with AI is like, we can help those 80%, by directing them to resources, by giving them resources so that their best experience is happening, right? So that they're getting their answers as quickly as they need. At the same time, it's freeing up 80% of the time that you as a business owner would have spent answering those questions that are, you're already copying and pasting the answers to anyway. And you can actually spend the time on the 20% being really personable, creating a solution to that issue, whatever issue they're having. And like making sure that you're giving them the highest level of care that you need because you're not really bogged down with this other stuff. So, I mean, that's an example of like, one way that we use it, but I'm always trying to think of interesting and reliable ways that we can integrate it into like our clients' workflows, right? Because it's just another tool in our toolbox, but it's a really powerful and fun tool to work with. I love it.
I think of a really simple one that I've used. So, we were hiring recently. We're kind of not hiring now. I don't know when this will come out, but anyway, so we were hiring, and on Indeed, you can have an automatic response. So the bottom of the job listing says, you know, please submit two professional references and answer this question. Why do you think you'd be a good fit, etc. If we do not have these couple things, your application will not be reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as they send a first message like, hey, they submit it, they get an automatic response that doubles down and says like, hey, if you haven't submitted these things, and that, I mean, that in my mind is an example of something. If I had to reach out to each one of them and say the same thing, so it saves so much time just having that automatic response. And it's also, that tactic is a huge filter too if you're hiring, but it's just, that's such a simple, like I'd say like level one automation of that response, and then I can just go from there. And it's so much time I didn't have to spend going through everyone. Did they submit it? Did they submit it? And it's just a yes no thing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. That's the kind of thing that like it doesn't help anybody if you do it, right?
Yeah.
All it does is reduce like the amount that you can do and put a strain on your time, right? So, who cares if the computer is copying and pasting that, or, an AI is, you know, doing something like that, right? And I wouldn't want it to like make hiring decisions, and I would never recommend that anybody do that.
You should try it.
Yeah.
See what happens.
But yeah, exactly. But the communication and that kind of stuff, like, you know, you know if you're going to give somebody an interview quickly, right? Within, a couple minutes of looking at their resume typically, and sometimes we look more deeply into things, and as a business owner, it's, your responsibility to make sure you're looking into those people as well as you can before you're deciding who to interview, who to hire, all those things. But it doesn't necessarily really benefit anybody if after those 2 minutes you have to spend 10 minutes writing an email to them, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to say the same thing. And what the result is that oftentimes people just ignore it, right? So, you know, maybe you're not reaching out to every single person who's not given an interview. Um, and, a part of that is that it's just not a time sensitive thing, right? It's not something that you're able to prioritize when you have a million other things going on, but it still is a kind thing to do. And it's something that I know people appreciate, right? Even if it's not the right time for them to work with you at the moment, maybe that's somebody who would be, potentially a future client, potentially a future worker, and also is a human being, right? And deserves to hear what's going on with their job application. So, just using that to amplify yourself and amplify the amount of time, and then, make those things happen as soon as you have made your human decision of I'm going to interview this person or not, can be a really powerful thing. Um,
It's really interesting and it's almost to that. I think this is probably a good scenario when some automations can be a bad use, or this is a good example case, is because well, I don't know from the applicant side of Indeed, but I think people will see this job listing and they'll just hit submit, submit application, and they won't read through it, so they won't submit those things that we ask.
yeah,
And that's the filter from our end is, hey, if you haven't actually read this, we're very serious about who we hire. It's very intentional, and it says in the listing, we're not looking for the next hire, we're looking for the right hire, because we know
yeah,
what it takes to train somebody, we know how important our culture is, what we're doing. But that's, when you use that automation, just apply, 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 and you're not reading it, I think that's probably kind of to what you're saying on the other end, is you don't want to just automate everything that you're doing, but you'd have to, you don't have time to respond to that many people, so you have to filter. But I see it from the opposite end when people are using automations, like just auto reply, auto apply rather, um,
hmm
and then you're doing yourself a huge disservice. So it's a balance there. Because
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
And it's like, I mean, there's a good analogy there of like, everyone gets these like automated like spam emails of like, do you need X, Y? And
yeah,
it's just like, no, like,
yeah, yeah,
like that is a terrible way to, like blast and praise, like a really awful way to try and engage with business owners because you're already getting off on the wrong foot. Like,
hmm
you can do volume and volume certainly helps, right? In terms of if you're going to be trying to reach out to people, but really the thing that is going to be the most valuable for you is actually like solving a problem.
hmm
And you know, you can use AI to identify people that might have that problem. That's a good use of AI, but to just use AI to multiply yourself and blast out, 100,000 emails in a month to try and like drum up some business is a really, it's a counterproductive thing, because you're just getting off. Even if you do get a client, like you're getting off on the wrong foot because you're not putting your best service forward. It doesn't matter how good your service is. If that's their initial impression of it, you're going to have a hard time like actually bringing some value or displaying your value to that client from the get-go. And it's the same thing with applying for jobs, right? There's a lot of apps out there that blast your resume onto every single, open job posting in your area, right? And it's just not necessarily the way that I would ever recommend that somebody do it because, one, you have to, you have to do that job if you do get it, right? And if you've, not vetted it on your side as an applicant, it can be, you know, jarring and, maybe it isn't the right fit. And you really want to make sure that you're thinking about those things like kind of beforehand. And then on the hiring side, like it makes it really hard for you to sift through all of those people, right? If, and it doesn't matter if you get 100 applicants for a job, if 95 of them are completely unqualified, then you got 5 applicants for the job, right? But, um, a lot of what these companies that do this are paid off of is, the number of like how many jobs did this bot apply you to, or how many applicants did you get, and the quality of it goes so far down in the service of getting the volume up that it almost is a net zero, except you end up doing a fair bit more work to get it there. So
That makes complete sense. And in my experience, it's been too bad too, because I'll look at some people's resume and they seem like they could be such a great fit, but they just, they never read the job description. And it's like your resume will tell you so much, but then your actions will also tell you so much. So
mhm.
you kind of get an insight to some behavior of, hey, I'm just auto replying. I'm not really paying attention to detail. And those are the between the lines things that you might not see on the resume, but you're seeing. So it's a little bit of a blessing at the same time. Sometimes they're doing you a favor because they're like, hey, I don't care. Just apply to everything. We'll see what we get. Might not be the person that, you know, someone would want on their team.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's an interesting thing because it's a balance of like, pushing yourself and maybe going outside of your comfort zone a little bit, right? But then also making sure you're doing that with intention and, doing that in a way that, reflects well on you for this, very kind of cryptic, interesting, and difficult first impression that you're trying to make through your resume.
Yeah.
Um, and it's very interesting. It's actually like, I feel like applying to jobs and like trying to do sales have like so many similarities, right? Because like if somebody's red flag goes off like at the very beginning of your interaction, whether it be a resume or like when you're having a conversation or a call or, intro call or whatever is going on, like that's not something that you'll really ever have much opportunity to recover from, right? So you have to be like so careful about how you're presenting yourself when you're doing that and making sure that you're being genuine. And, it's not to say like overthink it, but like, think twice about it if you're going to be using these AI tools to blast your resume out there because it might not serve you actually.
Yeah. Ours is, everyone we're hiring is primarily the number one skill is customer service.
Yeah.
So that's like the real meat of it is the interview. So like
Hmm.
what I've started doing now, and I found to be the best approach is Dave Ramsey calls it a drive-by interview. So it's like a 30-minute phone call.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of testing the waters. And that's screen filter number two after the screen and then, like third one is sit down with our team member. Fourth one is sit down. So it's really three interviews at a minimum after your resume. And that sounds extensive, but it's like it's taken me a lot longer to learn that the wrong fit is a lot harder to deal with. So like you're better off just finding really the right people that want to do it. But it's all like it all comes down to that in person thing. So yeah, if you're
Yeah.
just kind of blasting out automations, that might not be the best start. You also could have a killer resume and have all the right experience too, and you just made one choice that wasn't the best. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and that's not to say like don't use AI in your job search. Like there's a lot of ways that I think AI can really like benefit a job seeker, right?
Mhm.
Um, you know, one of those being like have it write you practice questions. Like AIs, can do a really good job of researching a company and kind of synthesizing what that interview might look like based on the service that they're providing, right? So you can practice with that. And I'm personally somebody who gets like very, very nervous at job interviews. Like,
Hmm.
it's like my worst case scenario. It's like the test in school that like you didn't study for, even though you did. Um, I get nervous at it. So having some experience kind of talking to those points that you're going to try and hit in your job interview um, beforehand can be really nice. And even like, you know, a lot of AI models can listen to you talk. Like you can literally talk to them and it can give you feedback about your tone, your delivery, your like if you're pausing, if you're saying a lot, it can give you those feedback points and that can really prepare you well going into an interview. Another way I would always recommend that people do it is through proofreading, right? How many good cover letters are thrown out because there's a typo. in the first, paragraph, or there's weird sentence structure or something, like having it give you some feedback, not necessarily having it edit your cover letter for you, but give you feedback on the cover letter that you can then go implement is also really valuable, because it will find that missed comma, or will tell you, okay, you have a run-on sentence here, or you forgot to delete, the last person's or the last job title that you had from your, or, the last job you were applying for from your first opening sentence, that kind of stuff. It can help you reduce those errors and just identify them before you go out, so that you're enabled to put your best foot forward there.
Yeah, not and I guess we already are going down the AI rabbit hole. I was
Yeah.
gonna say not to keep doing it, but when I use AI to proofread an email, I have to specifically tell it, "Do not rewrite this. I want to keep this in my words, but let me know what grammatical errors there are, spelling errors, anything." But because it can totally run away with it, and then it's like half of it can be out of context, and it can just not really represent you well.
Hmm.
So it's a balance there. If it can point a few things out and you can clean stuff up, but also like, I've had to find that balance too, because it can just run away with things
Yeah,
and make it its thing of its own.
definitely. And I think, like, you know, going back to like the AI is not a monolith thing, like AI also can be used in a variety of different ways, right? And you can give it instructions. I mean, like, kind of the base level of AI use in most businesses and personal lives today is like, through the chat interface, right? Okay, rewrite this cover letter, copy paste. Um, you know, that model that you're putting your information into and utilizing is trained on a ton of different stuff, like literally almost an unfathomable amount of information is it's able to process and has been trained on. So it doesn't really know what you're trying to do. I mean, you can prompt it right through the chat window of like, hey, don't rewrite this, just give me feedback. um but like from a systemic level, right, in its like quote unquote brain, I don't want to anthropomorphize it because it's not a human, right? But in
Someone argued that.
yeah, yeah, I mean, and I always shy away from that, but like, for the sake of argument here, we'll say in its brain, it doesn't really have the context that this is what you're trying to do. But, kind of the next step up, right, with utilizing AI is modifying it and giving it system prompts. And you can do this pretty easily right now with, through ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. Claude has like these skills, right? You can give your chatbot skills. And you can go in there, and anybody can do this. It like helps you build it in the chat window. You can say, let's build a skill for resume writing. And you can give it instructions saying, all right, you know, for my resume, read the job description, and highlight points that I should emphasize, and let me know the skills that I should emphasize, and give me feedback in terms of the structure and and the length and all these other things about your resume or your cover letter. And you can basically say, all right, these are the instructions that I want you to answer this chat with. And you don't have to go put it in every time, and you can optimize it so that then when you upload your resume cover letter onto it, it already knows what you're thinking as like, Tim, like, okay, I do not want to rewrite this. Like Tim has told me not to rewrite this. And, I'm to read like the key parts of this role and identify the parts of your resume that are in that role. I'm not supposed to make anything up, because it's told me that, but it can utilize those to give you a much, much better response, because in its thinking, in the thinking part of it, it's weighting those factors that you've told it that you've inputted more heavily than it is the entire rest of the world that it's been trained on. So you can get like exponentially better responses through your chat window by just giving it these systemic instructions. Um, you know, from there, you can kind of like, I would say like the third level of integrating AI into like your business is integrating it into your other tools that you're using, right? So, we can connect AI to, um, orders, that kind of thing. You can connect it to like your CRM. You can connect it to like your stock if you hold physical inventory. And then you can utilize it to like give you information about those. Sometimes if you're if you're careful with it, you can actually create an agent, right? Which is an AI model that can go and actually do things with your different pieces of information. So like, I know you use like HubSpot. Um, like you could create an AI agent that would go into your HubSpot and identify people that you haven't spoken with in, over a year or something and prompt you to send them an email, right? Or enroll them in like an email sequence that you can build out. And that's not something that you have to like touch, right? For instance, for a client, I've built an AI agent um, that monitors their support inbox, right? And they use Shopify for their e-commerce, and so it monitors the support inbox. When somebody emails them and says, "Where's my order number?" Blah blah blah. It goes through. It can extract the order number. It can extract the email of the person that's sending it, and it can go into Shopify and find those orders and just pull the information, right? Pull the tracking number, pull the shipping info, the order status, and it can put it back into your customer service inbox, not to write an email to respond to it, but so your customer service person, or if that's you, you can see all of that stuff without having to go search it and then respond quickly. So you can do stuff like that where it can go and almost do tasks for you. That's kind of the third level. And then the fourth level, which is really theoretical at this point. Like, I mean, some people do this, but it's not something that I would ever recommend that you, pursue too heavily at the moment, because the tech's not quite there, is like a system of agents. So like, you can have basically an AI agent that runs a bunch of other AI agents and tells them what to do. It can orchestrate tasks kind of end to end. And that's like kind of frontier stuff, right? There are companies out there that do an amazing job at this. But I've never really seen it work at the small business level, right? In a way that I would feel comfortable saying, yeah, stake your entire small business, which is like a huge portion of your life, on this agent being able to do this correctly. But, you know,
You remind me of a story my good friend Kyle was telling me, that he was sitting next to a guy on a plane, and it was, I think, a red eye, like that Salt Lake flight coming back here or something. And they got talking, and he's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I got all these agents doing all my work and everything. So like I don't have to do anything." And I told him too, I was like, it's kind of ironic that he says he doesn't have to do anything and he's working on his computer at midnight while this is happening. But yeah, I'd imagine there's different levels just depending on how savvy you are. Probably a lot of, depending on your tech level, a lot of room, a big risk depending on what you're doing, but probably huge reward too, depending on what you can automate.
mhm.
That's what I was kind of going to ask you. And you said levels. If you called it like a Zap or an automation, what's the what's the deepest level you've gone? What's the most probably softwares you've had working together?
Oh man, it's a lot. I'll tell you. Like, um, I've seen automations that have necessitated up to like 80 or 90 steps that I've done. I've worked on large and complex systems, right? There comes a point where like you're bringing all these things together, it becomes very difficult to kind of understand and keep track of it. So, usually I try and keep my automations to a fairly discrete level, right? When I'm building something, like, I want to have an automation do basically one thing, right? So then if that one thing goes wrong, I can go back and find it and correct it. But, sometimes it's possible to have, five or six different tools connected all at once. And like a good example of like something that connects a lot of tools, but isn't actually a terribly complicated automation to do, is like an onboarding automation. So like say somebody comes to your website and fills out your form, right? You have to communicate with that person in some way. And the more quickly you can communicate with them, the higher the chances are that you earn their business as a customer. So, you know, when we get that in kind of the old way, you'd have to wait for somebody to notice that, you know, and maybe send them an email. Maybe you add them into your HubSpot or Mailchimp to send, marketing emails in the future. Perhaps you add them into your CRM so that like your, salesperson knows to follow up. Maybe it's like for you, like maybe you have to schedule a ride, right? So you have to put it into whatever software you're using to schedule a ride. And if all those things don't talk to each other, that can take a fair bit of time. We're talking like maybe half an hour per client that comes in if you have to do all of these things manually. We can create a Zap that ties those five or six different pieces of software that you're using together, so that as soon as this person enters their info, they're getting an acknowledgement, right? That, okay, yeah, we got your outreach. Thank you. Somebody will be in touch shortly. And then, we can go and notify the salesperson on Slack and add them to the CRM, and we can add them to a Google Calendar, and we can add them to your MailChimp and send an email, right? Like all of these things can happen automatically, without anybody having to touch it, right? So then everyone can kind of just do their jobs without worrying about, oh, did, Matt update the CRM with all the new leads, or, did he reach out to these people who need, service? Or, you can just tell basically where everybody is at in that process immediately without anybody having to touch it. And that's like a really powerful and, relatively quick and common automation that we can do.
Yeah, it makes sense. Because that's a lot just to remember all those little things.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then as your business grows, I was just talking with someone who works for a pretty big company now, and they were a lot smaller when he started. And because I love what software can do and how useful it can be. I also just, by nature and by my background, I'm not a tech guy, and like more starts to drive me crazy. So there's that balance of I don't want to have 10 softwares for my
Yeah.
team of 10,
Yeah, totally.
but there's I don't know, there's some kind of painful points too when you're smaller where you need more. And then I think all the software companies, they kind of have their specialty. All of them want to do everything, but none of them do everything well. It's
Yeah.
kind of like any business. So I don't know, it's a weird, you know, it's a weird place to be in. How many do you need? What works best? What becomes too much? And then I made my joke about the government, but it's
Yeah.
like sometimes there's so much, and like you were saying, 90 different steps that it's like, why does it take us 2 months to just get an email sent?
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
and why doesn't anyone like no one has a fax machine anymore? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
But yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of it is like, you know, it, it's not necessarily like an issue of, time or motivation or whatever, but sometimes it's an issue of visibility, right?
Mhm.
Like people, you need to know what you need to do in order to do it, right? So, even if we're not automating some of these steps, just, automating a system that can keep track of all those things for you, or like, prompt you, right, to know what to do, and keep everything organized is a huge piece. But, also to what you mentioned about like having 10 different pieces of software, right? That's like, that's a lot. And, sometimes we work with people who are in that position where they have all those different pieces of software and require it. If we're starting out, like, with kind of moving off of like spreadsheets or whatever, like I typically don't recommend that you would put together that many pieces of software.
Mhm.
Because one, it's going to cost you a fortune. And then two, it'll create some complexity. And, a big piece of what we try and focus on when we're developing a software system is adding simplicity. And, like adding simplicity is a really hard thing to do because it's our natural inclination to say, all right, well, we need to do this, we need to have this calendar booking, and we need to have, and we need to have all these automations that are going to send a million emails, and we need to, um, we need to go and create this report automatically in QuickBooks, or, whatever we're tempted to do. Like thinking about from the start to beginning, like what do you actually need? And then what's going to serve that in the best way possible is, an important piece. And I definitely recommend, fairly frequently that people don't automate steps of their process, even that they want to, because it's like, hey, that's like something you would actually want to have like some human eyes on, and like is something that's important for you as like a business owner, or you as an employee to understand and to have a touch point on, even if it's something that could be automated, right? We don't necessarily want to do that everywhere. So, knowing where those things apply and how to use them is also a big component of what we try and do at Checkmark. But it's a difficult thing to do for sure sometimes.
I'll tell you what my bookkeeper said to me. She's more recent with me, or I'm more recently using her. She's really good at what she does. She has some inside knowledge just on my market, but she works with Profit First, which is it's a kind of way to manage your finances. I don't know if you're
Hmm.
familiar with it or not, but I love the Profit First model. That's how I manage all my finances, and she's very familiar with it. So she works great. but I was talking with her because I see all kinds of stuff on QuickBooks. You can integrate AI, you can do all this stuff. And she said something really interesting that I'd never thought of. She wondered if all this entry level stuff is going to get automated, how people are going to become true experts.
Yeah.
Because how do you become an expert bookkeeper or CPA if you never, spend enough time just kind of grinding through QuickBooks and figuring out how to, like, yeah, you might be able to automate most of that and that's good. But if you don't have a cursory understanding of any of it, at some point, you're not going to be a pro at, like, oh, I know what happened. I know what happened. Like, this glitch happened, or this automation didn't work. So let me hop in there. But kind of like to what you're saying, if you just automate everything, you don't really know if something's wrong. And then when it does go wrong and you need to step in and have some human intervention, you don't know how to fix it.
Yeah. And it's identifying those steps that should be automated versus those that shouldn't, right? That's a real big key in making any, proper and functional automation system is, if you don't know what's going on or you don't know, how your customer is being served by whatever you're doing, then you're kind of flying dark because like
Mm,
ultimately that's who you answer to is your customer. So you can, like back to the guy on the plane with the 10 AI agents, right? That's running his business. It's like, okay, awesome in theory. Like, what happens when your client has a question, or
yeah.
or what happens when it's like something that your AI can't do, and it's kind of weird as like for me as like an AI advocate and somebody that implements AI for businesses professionally, um, to say like hold your horses a little bit, but it's a conversation we frequently have. I mean, be very suspicious if you're ever talking to somebody who's like an AI expert who is like leading with the tool, right? Like you always lead with the process and you always lead with the experience in terms of how you should be thinking about automating or integrating these things because ultimately those are the two things that you're going to have to interface with your day-to-day business process and your customer's experience, and those are the two kind of guiding stars. So we don't want to start with, yeah, like you need AI, like what do you need AI for? you know what's what are you going to do with it? How does it improve your customer experience? How does it improve your day? How does it improve your employees experience, right? And if you can't answer those questions well, then you're not set up for success.
Yeah, my thought about AI is, in my business and a lot of businesses, customer service. A lot of mine is, and nothing. What I really love about Montana, one of the many things is we do so much in person, so much is face to face, and we have that more hospitable, personable experience with our customers and with each other. So if I can use AI to automate stuff, I can, if I can give myself more financial bandwidth to then be able to hire the right people to really shine and do well in that point. Use AI as a tool to complement the people that are really good at their job, not necessarily take away a job, but do the stuff that I would much rather have myself and any of my team out interacting with people, whether it's on the phone or in person, and not, sitting behind a computer sending automated emails to applicants all day long or customers.
Yeah,
So
totally.
I think that's a healthy balance, and it's not perfect, but we're always working on it.
Yeah, and that's exactly the right way to think about it. Is like, what does this enable me as a human to do? Right. Can I make this better? Can I make this more human? Right. And it's kind of a funny thing to say I'm going to use AI in my business to make things more human, but it should be, right? Like that's the gold standard is when people, you know, you make that human to human connection. It's really, really awesome. And that's definitely something that like, you always want to be enabling and to focus on. So yeah, using AI to not take away people, but to add human interaction and human element to your business is going to be something that's big moving forward. And I think that's the way that small businesses are going to start to have to implement this stuff, right? Because you'll see that if we go, fully AI and automate everything, then the quality of service is going to go so far down that like a lot of people will be forced to rethink that strategy, right?
Yeah, it's exciting for me in a sense. And this probably sounds weird, but it really gives an opportunity that people that really focus on that human to human experience,
Hmm.
like it gives them even more room to shine and to do better. And that's where my main priorities are.
Yeah.
When you were talking kind of about training the AI, prompting it or teaching it a skill. I think about this a lot, and I'm probably not very generous with this. When people send emails and they're filled with emojis, it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
And this is because of me personally. And some people might do this. I realize everyone's different, but I would never type an email and put a bunch of emojis in. So every time I see it, it's just like screams AI to me.
Hmm.
So my anything that my A does is it knows very well that we are not emoji.
Yeah.
Now they're useful. I'll use them sometimes when I'm texting, but it's just there's some things that are so they seem so anti-human, and
Yeah.
they scream that to me sometimes. I'm like, come on, like um no disrespect to anyone that uses a lot of emojis. Please do your thing. But I just see that or things like that, and it's just like, man, I don't like people don't talk like that, or at least most of the people I talk to. So it's not how most humans talk.
Yeah.
So it's anyway.
I mean, and it can enable more human to human connection in person. It can also enable like a more human experience online, actually, too, which is kind of an interesting thing. There's lots of like communities out there that are specific to, on the internet, that are specific to different like businesses, right? Like I'm sure there's like a transportation Reddit or something like that.
Hmm.
People go to those things with like real questions, right? And you can see when the bots have infiltrated like a subreddit because they're just doing like the worst posts, right? All saying the same thing, and none of it's very good, right? And they're all 2 to 500 words long, full of lists and bullet points and emojis and stuff like that. It's just clearly like very AI driven, and the comments or the posts or whatever that inevitably get like risen to the top or have the highest social score, right? Which Reddit is interesting because we can see proxies for like how well people think you've answered your question. So the ones that always get upvoted are actually the ones that are not AI slop, right? You know, these people could have used AI to like monitor that Reddit and say, hey, Tim, somebody's asking a question in the r/transport community, but the people that are using it correctly are going in there and, using their expertise, their human voice to actually solve a problem, right? And, maybe that promotes your business, maybe it does all sorts of things, but ultimately, the reason that you're there and the reason that you should be focusing on it is that you're solving a problem, right? And adding value.
Yeah, and you're making me think to those people that, are so helpful and will, either make those Reddit posts or respond to them. And I think of that with people on YouTube. They're like, heroes without capes sometimes.
Oh,
The
totally.
people that the information that's on there, like I don't know if you've got a little bit of like a mechanical background, don't you?
Yeah, yeah,
Just
definitely.
that motorbike, which I want to ask you about.
Yeah,
The guys that'll put videos on YouTube, and I'm glad they make money doing that stuff because it's so helpful. And just the fact that they are like, not only am I going to solve this problem, but I'm gonna video record it, and I'm gonna automate everything I'm doing, and I'm gonna make a list of the tools, and so many things like that. It's so I yeah, just I'm so grateful for those people on whether it's Reddit or YouTube or what have you.
yeah. I mean, it's additive. It's additive,
Yeah.
right? And like thinking about like earlier we were talking about being part of a community, right? And like the only way to truly be a part of a community is to be additive,
Hmm.
right? You need to bring some value to those around you. And that's just a good way to approach your life, right?
Yeah.
And if you're bringing value to those around you, whether it's, fun or good information or support, if you're like supporting a friend, or partner through like a hard time, like you're adding some value, right? And that value inevitably will come back to you because, you know, you've added to the community's grown, and then that helps everybody out, right? So, when you're approaching something like Reddit, which is a community, with a mindset of like, yeah, we're gonna go in there and take all these clients, right? Or we're gonna go in there and promote our business, which is like inherently kind of a take. It's the wrong way to approach it, and people aren't going to respond to it. But if you show up there and you're just like, okay, this is going to be an ad, like this is going to be an addition, then it'll work out. Like with your YouTube, for instance, your YouTube example, like if somebody goes in there and teaches you how to rebuild the motor on a 1997 Ski-Doo 670, speaking from experience, I did that off of YouTube one time. Like you're definitely going to buy your parts from whatever shop that person is representing, right? If you need spares or whatever, because they've given you so much information that you can work with, that you can use, and added so much value to your experience that you're happy to give those people your money, right? If you're going to give the money to somebody, give it to somebody who's added some value to you, right? And it's just, it seems like so like, whoa, this is like really kind of basic when you get right down to it, but it's something that we lose sight of so frequently that like, people want to help those that have helped them, right? And that's kind of an inevitability.
Yeah, I'd really make it a point when it is one of those videos or situations and the people have an affiliate link or a referral link to use it, because I know that they, that might be how they make a living or they get a little kickback for that. And I'm like, yeah, you
Yeah.
deserved and happy to send it your way. And it's just very cool in those situations that like I said, those people are heroes.
Yeah,
They just,
totally. It's awesome.
and I think to that whole, like, I really like that, additive. I just like that term for it. Sometimes it can sound like complete bullshit when you say like, "Oh, just add value," and it like, because I feel like it's something you hear a lot
Hmm.
in the business world or in the guru world. When you do actually feel it and experience it, we were talking about that earlier too, is it's like the gift is already in the feeling you get from being a part of community and giving something. Yeah, there might be like the financial reward is just addition to it. But the way you feel as a human and a part of community when you know you've provided value, like that's the what you get initially. And then on top of that, like, yeah, hopefully, like money and all that other stuff will most likely follow that too, because it's a valuable thing and valuable things tend to keep existing in communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a valuable thing, but it's not necessarily a measurable thing,
Yeah.
right? And
That's the
that's,
yeah.
yeah, that's the kicker is like, you have to have some sort of faith
Hmm.
that what you're putting out is going to come back. And, you know, inevitably it does. And it's not that, you should approach it with like, okay, if I bring value to this community, it owes me,
Hmm.
right? Like that's not really how it works. But if you just, do those things for like the inherent reason that like it's sharing, it's additive, it's, um, people are benefiting from your knowledge, you're benefiting from others' knowledge, it's a trade off, then all of a sudden it starts to make a lot more, sense in terms of like a measurable way, right? Like if I learn how to, do something off of YouTube and then I go and post something on YouTube that somebody else learns off of me, that might not be a financial transaction, but it's a transaction of information that has been additive to both of us, right? Um, yeah. So
Yeah, and depending on what your beliefs are and how much of a, you know, if you're religious or spiritual or hippie or whatever, but like there's something about putting good things out when it comes back to you. So that's like, and if you're completely selfish and you just want to feel good, then you can just, be a part of your community and do things for people, and you'll most likely feel pretty good for
yeah,
that alone.
I
So
mean that's a receipt,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean energy follows energy, and that's like however you want to define it, right? Whether it be like religion, spirituality, or merely just mood, right? Like we're social creatures, and we feed off of our communities, right? And as social creatures who feed off of our communities, like our benefit that we get um, from those communities is, you know, like related to what we can put into them, right?
Yeah, and there's, as someone who's experienced firsthand like what it feels like to be part of a community, that alone, just feeling like you're part of a community is so valuable for your overall mental and emotional health.
Yeah, totally.
You made me think of something, and I'm like trying not to go down rabbit holes. So that means we probably will keep. Do you think there'll be an automation or an AI where people will try to, because you were saying it's immeasurable, but track this? Like, can I keep tabs on like how much good energy am I putting out? And because
Yeah,
they've talked about that type of thing, and I've heard in China before, like a social score.
yeah,
I wonder if people are. There probably already is things. I wouldn't be surprised at all. People trying to track the energy they're putting out, or they're keeping tallies on how many good things they think they're doing.
yeah, for sure. And I try not to think about that
Yeah.
component of it too much. If anybody calls me to try and build that, I'll tell you no. Um, but there are there are companies out there that today in the United States are like, kind of thinking about what you just mentioned, like a social
Yeah.
score. But I don't necessarily feel like that's a positive thing. I think it kind of misses the point, right? Of like, what are you putting out versus what are you getting back?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I don't know. It is definitely a rabbit hole that we got to be a little careful.
Well, to that, I don't use any, wearables that track my health or anything because there's certain things when you do start tracking them, I know the tendencies my mind will have, and it would become so hyper obsessed with my sleep score and my heart rate and everything else that I've just made that decision quite a long time ago that I'm just not going to use wearables to track everything because I think it'll kind of like defeat the purpose of what am I like? I'm just trying to sleep well and be healthy, but I don't want this to become this new task that I've got to accomplish. And I could imagine that being even worse if it was in this sense of
Yeah,
how
totally.
if you need this score to, so you can show up as a human.
Yeah. And then you're defining it too, which I think it's inherently an undefinable thing
Yeah.
too, right? And it should be,
Yeah.
you know, because it's so complex.
And completely subjective too.
Yeah. And completely subjective and entirely related to your attitude.
Yeah. 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 And okay. Rabbit hole avoided. Motorcycle.
Okay.
Well, yeah. What's your background? How'd you end up out here? You've got a cool motorbike that you were ripping around on the other day. So
Y-
what's
Yeah.
your story?
Yeah. Yeah. It's moped.
Okay,
Moped.
moped. I was motorbike. You could just
Yeah.
taken that and been like,
Yeah.
it's, yeah, it's a
It's a very,
motorcycle.
the R slash moped people would be
Mm-hmm.
they have very strict standards. Um, Anyway, yeah, going back to Reddit. No, yeah. So I actually grew up in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, um, which is a beautiful place, which has lots of awesome sunshine and a lot of beautiful access to the outdoors. Right, like we're right there with the Flatirons and the Front Range of Colorado, which is ironically an incredibly not populated part of the mountains of Colorado, right? Like, when we think of like Colorado mountain towns, we'll think of like Vail or Breckenridge, which I love those places. But, it's very like tourist heavy and focused. But, the Front Range, which is just outside of Boulder, is actually, a fairly remote range when you get right down to it. So, growing up, I really, really loved going out there and recreating with like my family and, all of the kind of classic outdoor activities, skiing, love skiing, huge skier. Really, really enjoy it. Fishing, camping, all that good
Mm.
stuff. Um, and that kind of led me to, when it was time to think about going to school, thinking about, okay, like what do I really want to do? And I had been on a trip to Bozeman, kind of as a child and thought it was amazing. Went to Yellowstone, all those things that we do when we come here. And, you know, MSU had this really unique program, which was snow science geography, right? Um, so, a lot of people think, oh, like you're just a ski bum, which like, yeah, but snow science geography is actually a really interesting degree track where you're making GIS maps effectively, which is like, this amazing mapping software or group of mapping softwares that you can use to model things like water, right? Hydrology, model things like avalanche conditions, all of that stuff. And I just always found that to be just a spectacularly fascinating subject. Still to this day, I love it. So I decided to come here and study that. And, you know, when I came here at like 18, I just was like blown away by Montana and like just the beauty of it and the community that's out here and like the nature of the people that I met, which were just like so, friendly and everyone kind of had their head screwed on right, I felt like. And, you know, in a place like Bozeman, Montana, we really have to like kind of support each other. So I found an awesome community in school out here. Um, I I got really into actually freeride skiing. I was a ski racer growing up, and I missed like the competitive aspect of that when I went to school. So I actually started the MSU freeride team. So that's like big mountain skiing and stuff like that competition, which was a really young sport at the time, but it was awesome because it allowed me to kind of group up with this this community of people that had similar interests to me, and we got to go and travel on the school's dime, which was awesome. um,
Nice.
Still to this day, I felt like that was like the craziest thing they ever like that MSU has ever done was like give $1,200 to like a bunch of college students to basically go on a ski trip. I was like, how did I talk you guys into this? Under the guise of competition, which there was competition. It was fun, but I met a bunch of really great friends through that. And got to do a bunch of really interesting, cool things. But I was also exposed to like this world of business through that. Because we did have to do things like fundraising, and we had to interface with brands that wanted to sponsor us. And we were trying to basically figure out how to run this team and grow it and provide more opportunity to more kids who wanted to do this throughout my entire time at MSU. So, I really got to actually get a sense of like the outdoor industry and that kind of thing. And I won't necessarily give you the full career path, but I did end up doing a fair bit of work in the ski industry, and the outdoor industry prior to starting Checkmark Automations. Um, but through it all, I was kind of consistently feeling like, wow, like the the town that I'm in and the community that I have here is sort of the basis of everything that has happened in my life moving forward. And that time at MSU and that time, kind of tooling around and being part of the community in Bozeman has just, impacted me so much then and continues to impact me to this day. And I did move back to Colorado to work at a ski company called Faction Skis, and that was an awesome thing to do. I really enjoyed it. It was a great company to work at. That's actually where the seed for Checkmark Automation started, because I did a lot of things operationally there that could have been
Mhm.
improved, let's say. And I lived with my brother and my whole family's down there, so that was awesome. But then I ended up actually moving back here, um, because I just felt like this is where I needed to be. Um, my lovely partner Cal, who runs Big Sky Tutoring in town here, she was up here. So I was visiting like every month, anyway. So
Mhm.
I was like, all right, I'm just gonna move back. Um, and yeah, I feel like it's an amazing town, an amazing community, and the energy around here just really keeps me going.
What year did you graduate?
From high school or from college?
MSU.
Yeah, from MSU, I graduated 2018.
Okay. I
Yeah.
just had their episode just came out, a couple of kids that started like a student-led private equity,
Yeah.
um, Chase and Chris. And I was so impressed with them, what they did at the school, and just their social skills and the way they sat and talked and their ability to network. And then a little while back from that, Riley with Rivers Landscaping,
Hmm.
he's an MSU graduate, and my sister and brother-in-law are too. But I've like really impressed with what's been produced out of MSU, and um yeah, just like the different business stuff going on. And I know
Hmm.
there's all kinds of different tech and innovation stuff going on, but that's really cool to hear that you had that experience here at school and with that whole community.
Yeah, definitely. I think I hit it at I would say probably a sweet spot. I mean, it was it was low stress living for sure. I mean, obviously I worked really hard in school. Um, because I didn't want to waste that opportunity, right? But but I'm not gonna lie and say I didn't have any fun.
Yeah,
That was a great time. I think I paid like three like right when I graduated, I moved in this house. I was paying like $360 a month for rent,
nice.
which was like perfect because it just gives you like, having that like, something like that where, when you're that age, like your largest expense typically is going to be like rent. Having a place where like it was a reasonably affordable thing to live allows
Mhm.
you to take, maybe more risk than you would be able to do if there's more financial pressure. Obviously, housing and all that has gone way, way up, which is a whole nother rabbit hole. But but at the time, I was really grateful that I was able to do that because it kind of let me do a couple different things career wise that I don't know that I would have been able to justify or do if I, was having to, you know, really pay more for rent and that kind of thing. So.
So you said 2018 is when you graduated. Were you doing any computer science or anything with computers?
Yeah, so I actually worked for like an outdoor tech company
Okay.
called curated.com.
Mhm.
It was actually called deal.com when I got hired there. But they were like a high growth startup. that was my first time like working in like a proper startup ever. And they ended up going quite large and growing up quite a lot. Eventually got acquired just a couple of years ago, um, which was awesome for them. I didn't work there the whole time, but I was like their I was their first ski specific employee, or their second, maybe
Mhm.
behind the guy that was like really putting the program together. Um, but I was pretty early on there, and they actually ran it out of like an apartment on Main Street.
Nice.
Um, which was awesome because it like totally opened my eyes. Like, okay, this company is like doing real stuff, and they're moving fast, but they're also not afraid to like try things, right? Like it was never like, oh, let's kind of think about this ad nauseum and decide if we want to change 3 words on our website, right? It was like, okay, let's try a million different things, and if 3 of them work, then that's awesome. And it also showed me like you don't really need to have like you know that full office, or really a lot of the things that we've started to think about, or that I initially had thought about as like a business,
Mhm.
right? Like, you don't necessarily have to have all that infrastructure in place before you can test an idea. And eventually they did have a lot of that infrastructure in place, but it was a great first thing to do because it sort of gave me an unrealistic expectation of what work life would be like in the best way possible, because it showed me right from the get go that it's okay to try stuff.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I can appreciate that too, because, when I started doing this, I was just running it from my house. Like
Yeah.
everything was, my vehicles were parked in the driveway.
Hmm.
And it seems like, oh, look at this cool podcast studio and office and shop. And this was like, just took 6 years to get here
Yeah.
and a lot of hard work. But yeah, it was so grassroots and it still is so grassroots. But yeah, you don't like, that's the last thing you need to start. You
Yeah.
really just need the guts to start, and then, the persistence and the kind of the vision and the, meaning to why you're doing it.
Yeah. And definitely, and I also think like mentorship too,
Yeah.
or like examples, right? Like I was really lucky that Cal had, she's been running her business for a long time. And, when I was thinking about starting this, and, actually it was maybe after I'd started, but I was thinking about going like full time on it and like really committing. She was like, it's never not going to be scary. Like, it will always be a risk, but at some point, like you just kind of have to do it, right? You can, because I'm like a textbook overthinker, um, system designer, that kind of thing. Like I definitely just needed like that example of like, all right, let's get started, to really like kind of push me out the door. And it's not easy. It's never been easy, but it certainly is worthwhile, I'd say.
I completely agree with that, that there's just different versions of, yeah, scary and stressful and fun and exciting all along the way, but it's not, I don't know, maybe it gets to a point some point when you got everything, no pun intended, but so automated, you're sitting back and
Yeah.
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 But it's getting started, and then you figure it out as you go and you pivot, and yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even when you have it automated, you'll figure out new things to do. You'll
Yeah.
figure out something else to stress about.
Yeah,
I promise.
there's just new things and new levels. I don't know, they say like new levels bring new devils, and that's very true.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
but
But
it's fun to like, I don't know, for me personally, I appreciate the challenge. Sometimes it, wears me down and stresses me out, and but I also know why I'm doing this and enjoy it. So it's it's a like it's it's a worthy, honorable thing to be trying to accomplish something, and, hopefully doing something good in your town and your community in the process.
yeah, totally. I mean, and it's almost like analogous to like going back to the mopeds,
Mhm.
and various snowmobiles. Like, I do have like a bit of like a hobby of being like of mechanically fixing things. Like I love mechanic stuff, or mechanical things in general. Um, I really, really, really enjoy working with them. But I had no idea how to do it at first. I mean, like the first thing that I undertook, and we talked about this on YouTube earlier, was I bought a snowmobile. And the snowmobile was not running, and I was like, oh, I'll just have to clean the carbs and do whatever. Like I'll replace the belt and it'll run, and that was not the case. I ended up rebuilding basically that entire thing, and um, ultimately, like I made a bunch of mistakes with that build. Like there were a couple times where I broke off like, really rookie stuff. Like I broke off the studs on like the head, two of them
Bummer.
because I because I was using a drill, which you should not do, and I had it set the wrong direction, and so of course when I blasted, it just like snapped. Great, um, and ultimately what
Using like
happened?
an impact gun.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I was using an impact, which I shouldn't have been doing,
Mm.
and really I should have just been using a ratchet and not been lazy. But yeah, so I broke off the studs in this motor, and I thought I was like, oh my god, I just like wrecked myself. And this was when rent was 360. I think I paid $400 for this snowmobile, um, and a new engine was like 1,200, and that was not happening. Like this was about to be trash. But you just take a moment and you think about it, and you get on YouTube and download a PDF that some helpful person had added to the internet of the service manual for this thing. And if you just get cracking on it, like eventually you'll figure out how to do all this stuff. And now I know how to change the head. Now I know how to change the studs on a head of a motor. And like all of these things, they help you further down the line, even though it's like a real pain in the ass at the time. Um, and it's just like that problem solving process is something that I really, really enjoy. Um, and it's funny because it's like very similar in business. It's like you have problems and you can break the heads off a bunch of times. I've already done it 3 times this year. Um, but eventually you figure out how not to break the heads off, or you figure out how to do things and solve your problems and fix your mistakes, and it ends up being not a big deal, but not a huge deal, right? And something that you move through, and I don't know. Business problems for me are like larger and more stressful typically than like engine problems, especially on like a little 2-stroke moped or whatever. But like if you can just take your mind off of it and like fix something, anything, it makes you much, much less stressed about the other stuff that you have to fix because, you didn't know how to do that and you figured it out, right? And the same thing could happen in a number of different ways. So,
It's like half the reason I'm building the table over there that we were talking about.
yeah.
It's therapeutic sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I'm pretty mechanically inclined by the nature of growing up on a farm and having to learn how to fix things. But there's something for me with those problems. Oh, they seem so simple. Like I can see them. They're
Yeah.
all right in front of me. They're not this kind of, which can become very complex depending on what you're doing in business and how many people are involved.
Yeah.
Something like a mechanical problem is so like single, straightforward. How did you get the studs out or the
How did I get
bolts?
the studs out? There was a blowtorch involved.
Okay.
Um, there was some vice grips involved. There were actually 2 sets of vice grips involved. And yeah, just kind of blasted it with a torch and then backed it out.
But you had
Um,
no head to
yeah,
grip on. Were you using an easy out or anything or no?
no, I didn't end up, that's probably how I would do it now.
Yeah.
Um, but no, yeah, I just had like, I had like the, like, there was a little bit left because it was like the stud was through the block
Uh-huh.
and threaded on the very end, and I broke it like about halfway. Luckily, both of them broke about halfway, which I actually learned later was a pretty common issue with those engines. But so I did have something that I was able to
Oh, it was
grip
like
onto.
halfway out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I
So
gotcha.
an easy out still probably would have been
Yeah.
better. But
Those bolts are probably very hardened though, so it would
yeah,
hurt.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I at one point had like, yeah, had cracked all my knuckles like trying to squeeze these vice grips onto there tight and like move it. And it worked out. I eventually ended up selling that snowmobile because it did try to strand me like 3 or 4 times in a row,
Yeah.
um,
Fair.
with the different things breaking. And I was like, man, I got to get rid of this thing before I get stuck out there. So I put it on Craigslist. Actually, this is a funny story. And some guy came down from Helena.
Every story that starts with Craigslist is a
Yeah,
funny story.
it was good. He came down from Helena and he was like, he was, and I was honest on the ad. I was like, this thing is sketchy. Like, and it was clear that it was sketchy, that it was spray painted. Like it was obviously not something that had been deeply cared for. So he comes down and I'm like trying to sell this thing to him. He's like, you know, if it starts right now, I'll give you the $400. And what had happened is the pull cord had broken, and that was the last time I used it. Is the pull cord broke way out in the backcountry, and I was like, I'm done. Like I'm done with this thing. So I hadn't fixed the pull cord yet. And so I wrapped like a strap around the clutch and was like, if you ever did anything for me, this snowmobile, like I was talking to it, I was like, if you ever did anything for me, start right now. And I pulled it and started right up. So that was good. And he took it away. And I really hope that it worked for him for a long time because that was a pretty cool sled, but it was fast. But
Yeah, and $400.
yeah,
Dang.
it was not my problem anymore. So
What year did you say? 97?
97. Yeah,
Nice.
it was blue, had the cool blue trailing arms. Yeah.
Yeah, when you said 97, I had like a 96 Ford F350. And the amount of stuff I did on that,
Oh,
like that diesel
best
motor.
truck.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
amount of stuff I did just from YouTube videos, like injector seals, and I did a full motor, like changed the motor, oil pan, clutch, everything. And it's like all from learning. And one of my father's friends told me my father passed away when I was pretty young, but they said to me, man, I was so envious of your father because he could just fix anything. So I like just naturally thought, well, I'm his son, so that must mean. And so I just always had in my head, I can fix anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a curse or a blessing, but it does put me in situations where I'll always say I could figure this out, and then we have those godsends like YouTube and everything else, and
Yeah.
I it's fun. I try not to get too carried away with it, and I have to know when to hand things off, when to stay in my lane. But I'll show you the shop after too, because man, I grew up in like we didn't have a concrete floor in our shop on the farm. Like it was a dairy farm. It was
Mm-hmm.
as much as of a farm as a farm can get, and it was fully operational. And I was like almost in tears, like not really, but like I felt the emotion of having a shop 2 winters ago.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I had a warm shop
Yeah.
to work in, it's like it's so cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like
That's so cool.
so many cold winters working on stuff, freezing outside, like hands are blue, just like like bleeding knuckles and
Yeah.
everything else. And anyway, so I feel you. It's fun. It's fun working on stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome. Even if it's frustrating, like ultimately,
Yeah.
it still is like pretty fun. And yeah. So I've actually done a few mopeds. I think I'm on my
Said no
third
one
or
ever
fourth.
on this podcast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm on my third or fourth, and I'll just buy these absolute junkers. I mean,
Nice.
it's my favorite thing to do is to get something that like is like completely destroyed. Um, and I think the one that you saw is that one is like the probably the cleanest one I ever bought. I think I paid like 350 for it. And then of course I ruined it.
I was gonna say I think that thing looked kind of sketchy.
Yeah, it was. It looked way less sketchy when I bought it, but
Nice.
but I tore the tank off and put a top tank and a new seat and a couple other things on it. But like the first one I did was like $50 and that was pretty sweet. I used to ride it around Bozeman.
Hmm.
And I replaced all the plastics with like I put a skateboard on the front of it and like cut like a wooden floor for it and it was wrapped the whole seat in like those tablecloths from like Italian restaurants.
Yeah, the checkered
Yeah,
ones.
like the checkered
Yeah, yeah,
ones. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so it was sketchy and then yeah, I did one over COVID too. That one got stolen. I was pretty bummed about that.
What?
Yeah, I
Come
was
on.
living in Colorado at the time with my brother and we had it parked kind of near, like downtown Boulder, like but the university side of it where there's a fair few number of shenanigans. And one day I woke up and like got out to go like ride it to work and I was like, oh no, it's gone.
That's a
So
bummer.
I went and it was somebody had dumped it in the creek. So then I brought it back and fixed it and then somebody stole it and ripped all the wires out. Um, and
Bummer.
then I was over it. Actually, eventually it got stolen for a third time by the guy that was the maintenance guy at the building. And he was like, I called him. I was like, "Did you take the moped?" And he was like, "Yeah." I like thought it was like abandoned, and I was like, "No, you stole it." And then it sat for a while, and then ultimately I was like, "Dude, like, if you want it, like, go for it." So that was his problem at that point.
That's funny.
Moped with no wiring.
I just more recently, I guess in the last 6 months, I got a 2008 Tacoma
Mm,
with a 6 speed. And forever, for like, the last 5+ years, one of like my personal vehicle was also a company vehicle.
yeah.
Just by the nature of, like don't have finances for extra vehicles. And that thing is so much fun because it like reminds me of some of the older trucks I had. It's a Toyota. It's very clean and it runs great. And it's a little bit, there's a little bit of nostalgia too, just driving a manual pickup truck around. And it's like the most freeing thing I've had in the last 6 years.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I had an '08 Tacoma too that I loved that truck, and
Mhm.
I drove it until about 2 years ago. I ended up selling it,
Yeah.
just because it was time. But I've actually kind of regretted selling it ever since I did that, just because it was like such a nice like tactile truck,
Yeah.
and you could fix things on it, and yeah, that one actually also got stolen at one point, and I got it back. Yeah, um,
Noticing a pattern here.
yeah, no, and all of them were locked, but yeah, that got stolen one time. I was in Switzerland working for Faction. Faction Skis is from Switzerland, and I was there for the summer, which was an amazing experience. But like one night I get a call from my parents and they're like, "So somebody stole your truck." Um and we heard it like it had this blown out muffler. So it was clearly the truck that, when it was starting, you knew which one it was. Um and they're like, "We're so sorry, like it got stolen out of our driveway." I was like, "All right, well, whatever, like I'll figure this out later." So 3 months pass, I'm back to reality, right? And like I land back in Denver, no truck.
And this was a 2008.
It was at '08
Okay.
Tacoma.
Yeah.
This was, I think, also in 2020, or maybe slightly after 2022, maybe. Um, but like I spent a bunch of time, living without a car, and eventually I was like, all right, I'm gonna go like try and find a new car. And this was like height of the used car market, like they're crazy. So I eventually found this like 2001 Honda Element,
Nice.
and they wanted like 13K for it, like an insane, and I think it had like 150,000 miles, like an insane amount of money for this car. Sick car, but anyways, like I was literally like, I think I was Ubering or took the bus up to the dealership, which was in a different town, to go buy it, and I got there late because there was like some traffic or the bus was late or something. Um, and I sat down with the guy and I was like, all right, I'm gonna buy this car, and like, he was like, all right, we'll come back tomorrow. You can buy it. You can do the paperwork. I did a test drive. I swear that night, 2 a.m., I get a call, and I would normally not pick up this phone. I don't know why I did, but I answered it, and he's like, "This is Officer Barbady from, Boulder PD, and do you have a 2008 Toyota Tacoma that's blue?" And we found it. It was reported stolen, and it turns out it was like a couple blocks from where it had been stolen. I mean, it had like 50 miles more on the clock than it
Oh,
did when I
really?
parked it. Yeah, so that somebody had some fun in it. It was had a flat tire. One of the leaf springs was broken, so I think they like
Damn.
nailed something. Um, but anyways, it worked out, and I still had the key. So he was like, if you come like with the key, I'll give it back to you. And so I rode my bike down there with the key. I showed up on my bike at 2 a.m. He's like, "Damn, you really don't have a car, do you?" I was like, "This is my car." Like, turned it over, and it was like he was like, "Yeah, all right, you can have it back." Um,
That's wild.
so
Good thing you
yeah,
didn't buy the Element.
yeah, right. And I,
Yeah.
I called the guy the next day. I was like, "Dude, you're not gonna believe me. I'm so sorry." And he was like, "Yeah, whatever, guy. Like, you just wasted my time." But anyways, that Element would have been a cool car, but I was so glad I got that truck back.
Yeah. My thought is with this thing, there's no reason I shouldn't still have it in 20 years.
Yeah,
If I have kids by then, it could be one of my kids' cars, or it can just be a hunting truck or a farm truck.
yeah,
But
totally.
that thing's it's got 170 on it right now,
Oh, nice.
so it's
Yeah, you got
clean.
plenty of
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But I just run into the shop and back it, but the thing's fun.
yeah,
It's got
that's
cruise
great.
control. I'm like, what?
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Manual cruise
I
control.
know.
Love that.
I didn't figure it out for like a month. I hit it with my knee, and I'm like cruise, and I like see. I'm like, whoa. So I'm like, I'll rip down 90 with the cruise control on in sixth gear.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, this was fun chatting with you.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll show you the shop after. Wow, where do people go if they want to automate their business and, you know,
Yeah, if you're feeling like you're spending too much time on administration and you feel like you want to get some of that back, go to www.checkmarkautomations.com. We do a free 1 hour consultation, right? So like you can we'll get in there and like take a look at your processes and tell you what you need to do. And even if you go do that yourself, like it's a valuable call. It's free, 1 hour. So, you know, definitely do that, or you can send me an email, matt@checkmarkautomations.com.
cool.
Um, but yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Tim. This is so cool.
Yeah, man, it's
It's
fun.
good to see the shop, man.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is
Are you
super
guys
cool.
on social or anything or no?
Um, We're on LinkedIn,
Okay.
but we don't really have like an Instagram
Yeah.
or I think we might have a Facebook page, but yeah, but checkmarkautomations.com is probably the best way to get in touch.
Cool, man. Yeah, I know you from the chamber group we're in. So it's like appreciate you being part of the community and doing this. And yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, man,
Yeah, I'll get this out there soon and hopefully some people find it and come save themselves some time and headache.
for sure. This is
Cool.
super cool.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Good stuff, man.
Nice, man.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was fun. This is so cool. I thought I would get like a little bit nervous, but actually I was like, I felt like that was totally just a conversation.
Thanks for listening, folks. You can find the full blog post for every episode, along with key takeaways and links at mountain-mule.com. If you haven't yet, consider following the show. That one small action helps these Montana businesses get seen, grow, and thrive, and it helps this podcast keep going too. If you know a business that would be a good fit for the show, we'd love to hear from you. Just reach out through the website or social. Thank you for supporting these Montana businesses. See you on the next show.